So as we saw in the last video, the principles and parameters model assumes this kind of cumbersome, or at least very internally structured model of how language works. And so according to this view, this whole system is roughly what constitutes UG, or universal grammar. And universal grammar, remember, is just the genetic aspect or part of the language faculty. So how is this model different from the minimalist program? And the answer is very significantly. The prime directive of the minimalist program is to locate as much as possible the explanation for linguistic phenomena outside of the language faculty. So explain language as much as possible, by way of external conditions. And so how this is implemented, how this prime directive is put into practice, follows from a pretty simple question. And the question is, what parts of language are conceptually necessary? In other words, what parts of the language faculty can we not afford to do without? Well, the answer is, on the one hand, of course, we have to have some sort of lexicon. After all, there are words. And the lexicon must be operated upon by some sort of operation in order to yield infinite structures, right? So A, infinite generation, and B, all of these must be links between sound and meaning. Well, it might be better to say, let's say gesture instead of sound here. Just erase that. Because of course it's not the case that language is just the linkage of sound and meaning, as is attested to by sign languages. So we must account for both infinite generation and the fact that expressions that are infinitely generated must each contain links between gesture or sound or articulation and meaning. So what is the simplest way to account for these two facts? What are the conceptually necessary components of the principles and parameters approach that we need in order to account for language? The answer is that we can basically do away with this entire model, do away with it entirely, and instead propose that all language is one sort of recursive operation, recursion, let's say, and just in brackets here, I'm going to put merge, some sort of recursive operation that applies and yields, on the one hand, information that's accessed by the sensory motor system, or SM, which is basically just whatever mental faculty is responsible for articulation and perception, whether that's a system that's primarily based on gestures or primarily based on sound. All of it, we can say, is just the sensory motor system. And on the other hand, we have this conceptual intentional system. Intentional again with an S, intentional system, or CI. And the conceptual intentional system is just meant to designate whatever mental faculty or module corresponds to the thing that gives interpretation to sentences.